write one about all the Victorian homes on the boulevard. You ever heard of the boulevard? The boulevard is Upper Spring Street, from the Presbyterian Church on up to Grotto Springs. And at one time, all of those people were known as high society. And they literally looked down on everyone else. There was also a group of people in town called the Mohawks. I have no idea where that name came from. But everybody who was in high society was automatically opposed to the Mohawks and vice versa.
And what years were
This was way back in the 1880s. A professor from Harrison, Arkansas, came over here in 1880. And of course, Eureka Springs was founded on July 4th, 1879. He came over here in 1880 and he literally wrote a book all about Eureka Springs. Eureka Springs has been for 144 years on a series of catch-up. 200 people in a wagon train came here in 1879. They were pulled by oxen and mules. You cannot get horses through all of that. They came to Basin Spring and they formed a community. Within 6 months, there were 5,000 people here. In 18 months, there were 15,000 people
And they cut
here.
down all the trees.
And they clear cut everything. And that's what it looked like. So you can, it literally was founded on all the healing waters. They didn't know about the other springs. They only knew about Basin Spring. But there are 60, usually everybody says 63 to 64 springs in a 1 mile radius of Basin Park. And they kept discovering all these springs. The doctors who came to town, the doctors, yeah. All you had to be a doctor in the 1880s, you had to know about superstition, you had to know about hypnosis, you had to know about herbs, and you had to know about spiritualism. The doctors in town used lavender light, electric shock, and the springs to heal people. So what really healed the people in town? Was it the water? Because the doctors could tell you which springs to go to heal whatever you had. Or was it because when you came, you bought 2 things, a tin cup and a staff, a red cedar stick, and you walked to as many springs 7 days a week as you possibly could. So what do you think healed people? When people came here, many of them had 2 sets of clothes, one they wore and one to be buried in, and that was it. You came to town, you literally identified yourself at a bank, and all those people who left town, they were still alive, they actually came to the bank and said, we're leaving town now. And all the other people, we don't know if they stayed, we don't know if they died. But there were so many people to come to town. There were 3 logging. There was Francesca Moshman, William Evans, and Mr. Bennett, and they all came to town and they were logging. Go back, George.
Okay.
Because that's Main Street. They were logging. Francesca Moshman, she literally, her husband died. She was a damn good businesswoman. She had over 5,000 acres of forestry. And the trick was you had to literally give the surveyor $1. The surveyor's chain was 40 foot long, so that's why all the lots are 40 foot square.
Chris, is there a spring visible in this image?
There is, no, not in this image, but there's one at Basin Spring, and it looks totally different than it does
Oh, I wonder
today.
somewhere.
But yeah, there's probably somewhere. But this is over, that's East Mountain on the left, on the top. But and the only thing that they would leave is just a few things. But anyway, they built all of these shacks, and they built them whichever they wanted to. They built them really quick. You paid the surveyor $1. All you had to do was sit down, cook dinner, and stick something in the ground, and you improved the land. However, if you've left to go back and get your family, Someone else could come along and say, well, I think that they've abandoned that property. So then the surveyor would make another $1. And so all of these, switch to the next one. So this is Main Street, and of course everyone knows that Leatherwood Creek runs underneath all the buildings on one side of Main Street. The tunnels that were built in the 1880s are still the tunnels that are there. If you look in the tunnels, it looks like a timber frame house. They're absolutely exquisitely built, but they're about 140 years old.
What kind of timber, what kind of wood is it? Oak?
Oh, it's not wood, it's all stone.
It's stone.
Everything is stone. It was made with all the limestone and it was all the Irish stonemasons that came to town.
Is it stable?
Well, now therein lies the problem. We lived here 6 years, and over by the Grand Central Hotel, there are 2 springs and Leatherwood Creek that run into that big parking lot right there that goes up Flint Street, okay? That caved in about 4 years ago.
I remember.
And then there was one wall on Crescent Grade, which is when you go down from Crescent Hotel down to Dairy Hollow, that wall came down from that one house. Then there was also a wall right by that parking lot by the Grand Central, and that came down about 2 years ago. So, and I watched them put in that sidewalk. I'm never going to walk on that sidewalk. It's held up with 2x4s. Not 4x4s, 2x4s. I'm never walking on that sidewalk. It is cement. So I've taken all of these so you can see from a mechanical, engineering, and architectural point of view what happened. Those bridges were all over town because the only way you could get from Main Street to First Street was go all the way to the end of South Main and find First Street. So they built bridges all over town, and this is the breaking of ground for the courthouse. And this is across the street. Some of these houses, that's not there, but that one's there. But literally, Leatherwood Creek ran underneath. If I can get up here. That's the tunnel. The city tried to get everybody on that side of town to all give money, because the city doesn't own that. The businesses do. That's why it's impossible to get the sidewalks fixed in this town. Businesses own the sidewalks. The city owns the ground underneath them. So all of those tunnels are still under there. So they wanted everybody on that side of the street to get a big pool of money in case anything caved in, they would have something to actually repair it. And everyone said no.
Wow.
It's over $1 million to excavate all of that out, rebuild the tunnels, and put it all back.
In those days.
Oh, well, in those days,
Yeah.
there was very few people who could
I
afford
mean,
that.
the $1 million.
Oh, well, it's $1 million now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay, next slide. Okay, there's the courthouse. It was built in 1908. Now look around it and see how different it is. The courthouse was literally built in the ravine above Leatherwood Creek. And in Butch's office, there's a trapdoor underneath his desk that goes down to the tunnels.
That would be so you can bail. You can bail.
So all of this was filled in, and those 2 houses are still there. But everything else is all filled in, and it's all parking lots now. And Perkins Lumber built that. Now, I don't know if any of you know this, but all that gingerbread in all these houses was made at the Perkins Lumber Company. All of the machines that produced all of that gingerbread are still there. They were first run by steam and then electricity. And they're all operated with conveyor belts, leather belts. And they're all still there.
Wow.
In the
I
patterns.
Well, they function?
Mhm.
In the patterns.
In the patterns. It's amazing. Everything is still there. Next slide.
I bought lumber from Perkins as they closed.
What-
Beaded board ceiling. 80s.
And here's another picture. This stairway is still there. Everything else is gone. It's now not a ravine anymore. It's literally parking lots.
So are those rooms, those bottom rooms, are they still?
And some of those little houses, now these are that's that stone house that's above it. There's two of them. One house was a home at I cannot remember, Fairmont, and they had the other one is exactly like it, and it was a boarding house. Next.
That bottom,
Wait a
bottom,
minute, go
is
back,
that
George.
still there?
These
Just-
two, I
No,
don't
of the
know,
courthouse.
it's all there, Cliff Cottage.
just walk down
I think
there.
it's still there, but they look different
The
now.
lower story of the courthouse.
Oh, the lower story of the courthouse, this is it. It's now practically, it's underground,
It's
quote
underground.
unquote.
But you can still walk down there.
Yeah.
From inside.
There's offices down
Yeah,
there.
all the city offices are down there. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the original Flatiron building. It's exactly where it always was. And if you'll notice all the gorgeous brickwork on the top and that semicircular thing on the top, that was built about 1880. It burned in 1890 along with the Perry House. You all know about the fires in town? There were 4 fires, 1883, 1888, 1890, and 1892, and they all burned a third of the town, and you'll see what Spring Street looked like with one of these photos in 1888. But this is the original Flatiron building, and this is Center Street, and that's Spring Street, and of course everything, all the streets in town were not paved until 1929. They were still gravel until 29. Next step. Okay, this is the second one. The first one burned in 1890. They rebuilt it, and this, as you see, it's now just 3 stories tall. But it's got that beautiful circular half circle top and all of this stonework. Does anybody know who Don Underwood is? Okay, Don Underwood rebuilt Eureka Springs. He built the Cornerstone building, Cornerstone Bank downtown. He helped rebuild the Flatiron building. He literally built the building where the Rowdy Beaver is. If you remember the Plaza, I think it was the Plaza Restaurant down on Main Street, he put all of that in. He literally is an amazing man to rebuild it. And this one burned in 1925.
Like he cut the stone for it.
He cut all the stone and had it placed. And a lot of the stone, the interesting thing about Don is that he literally was an engineer, not just a stone cutter and a sculptor. He designed many of the machines he used to cut that stone.
Wow.
He's just so talented.
So where did the fires originate from?
The 1890 fire originated over here, which now this is the Basin Park Hotel as it is today, 1905. Okay, and in 1890 it started burning. Slipped over here and burned that. Then it literally slipped over to Main Street and it burned everything from the Mud Street restaurant up to and including the Grand Central Hotel.
Wow.
Everything. And then the 92 fire started on the other side of Basin Park and burned everything up to, but not including, where the museum is today.
Wow.
Then the first fire in 83 started right there where the Baptist church is, and it burned all the way up Mountain Street and Eureka Street. And all of that was residential and businesses, even on Eureka Street. It burned everything on both sides. So you notice the tracks for the streetcars. But this was the second building, and that burned in 1925. Next slide. Now, when I came in 1957, I was 8 years old. That's what I saw. There was nothing there.
And when I came in '82, that corner building was the Pita Hut.
Yes.
And that was the hot spot of Eureka Springs, way back.
It was.
And that's where I'm looking.
But this is what I saw switch. And of course, this is the Presbyterian Church, the Powell Clayton House. Anybody know what the roof of that is?
What were you pointing to?
This roof right there.
Perkins Mill?
No.
No?
That's the Little Crescent Hotel where all the black people were. Wow. And they used Harding Spring for everything. If you look in that, you'd never know anything was there, ever, but that's where it was. And of course, this gazebo is now on East Mountain, rebuilt by the Rotarians, okay? This also was a stairway up to, next slide, the Crescent Hotel.
Is that where the library is?
Everybody says that all of those, the stories in Eureka Springs are great. Everybody says, oh, they just built the library on top of the stairway. No, they took it all down. They used the stones, but they completely redesigned the whole library. But that stairway went all the way up. It was a quick way up to the Crescent Hotel, and that bridge up there is now Crescent Street. Okay, Crescent Avenue. Everybody know where that is?
Across from the basin?
No,
That's by Harding Springs?
it is Harding Spring. And where are the Cliff Cottages? At one time, all of that land was in front of the Cliff Cottages, and they had houses built on it. And the street was over here, and as you can see, there wasn't a whole lot of it. It was literally going down the ravine. So in terms of all the architecture in town, it's not a whole lot of difference than it was then. Everything was built on stilts. Everything had to be built on stilts. And they kept rebuilding it. And see, my God, I think it's real interesting. There are no stairways in Eureka Springs. We just have slanted ladders. There are literally 16 steps, which are required, but oh no. It's amazing. Jeepers. But all those buildings, those homes were in front, and the next slide, now the Cliff Cottages. So that's how they changed the streets. All of this was boardwalk. There was boardwalks everywhere all over town. And they were all put in by the Eureka Improvement Company, headed up by Powell Clayton. He brought in the streetcars. They came in about 81, and they were gone by, or 91, and they were gone by 98, because everything was electrified. So then the streetcars were all electric. And here's another, here's Eastview, Whitcomb Cottage, and the Fairmont Hotel. Okay?
Priscilla Garrett lives there.
Yeah. And the only way,
Not Lucilla Garrett, Lucilla Zimmerman.
the only way you can get to those three houses are up the stairs. There's no other entrance. So how do you get those gigantic armoires, beds, and chests of drawers up those stairs, and they're only this wide? They all come apart. Everything came apart to get it up those stairs. Next slide. Okay, that's Basin Spring, probably about 1881, 1882. You can drive right up to the spring and get your water, and they have replumbed it. See the line?
Yeah.
It doesn't fall over the cliff anymore, which was right behind where the bandstand is today. It fell over the cliff, came on down, and went into Basin Spring, or just the Basin Rock. Okay, now, I have seen so many pictures of that Basin Rock, and according to Kalklash, this guy who came to town, the professor from Harrison, there are 3 basins originally. One was like to bathe your hands, wash your face, and the other 2 were much bigger, and you could bathe in them. But because so many stones have fallen down, I think it's real interesting. Eureka Springs has a very interesting way of freeze, thaw, and stones just come down from mountains. And then it rains, and then it dries up, and stones come down from the mountains. We live 3 miles south of town. It's a third of a mile off the road, and it's all gravel. And all of a sudden, it's like, where did that stone come from? It's right in the middle of the road. It wasn't there yesterday. So it just rolls down, and it's like they grow there. It's amazing. But you could drive right up to the park, and it says Basin Spring, and it was all electrified, and that was from J.S. Tibbs, and I'll talk about him in a little bit. Next slide. Okay, that's the Southern Hotel, And if you picture Basin Park, Basin Hotel is on the right, if you're in front of it, and the Southern Hotel was on the left. The Southern Hotel was 2 stories above the street. Now in the 1800s, and you came to town for the season, you came with trunks, probably 12 per person. Can you imagine taking those trunks up 2 stairways? So what they did,
Slide down from the top.
is it going? Go
Oh, you want the next
Yeah.
one? I'm sorry.
They actually filled all of it in, changed everything, and raised that about 20 feet. That's why you can't see the basin anymore. You can look down on it, but you can't see it anymore because it's underground. So if you'll notice, here's the boardwalk and everything, and look how high it is now compared to that other picture with that wagon in front of it. It's much higher. They incorporated all of the springs. The first thing the city did, because so many people were here, they were walking around, they were bathing, they were drinking it, they were pouring it over. They did whatever they could to heal. The first thing the city did is they said, okay, it's against the law to bathe in the springs. You can drink them, you can wash your hands, you can wash your face, that's it. And that was all to preserve the water, because they didn't want it polluted. And see, there's the original Flatiron building. Now this stairway's kind of there, but it probably has changed. And that's the Perry House. It had 100 rooms, and the Southern Hotel had 100 rooms. Next slide. Okay, that is how they solved getting up those 2 flights of stairs. The Southern Hotel got permission from the city to build an elevator. It was powered by mules. So you literally got in the elevator and the mules pulled it out, and the elevator would go up, and all the people would go up with their trunks and go over on a red cedar bridge directly in the lobby of that hotel. And this is J.S. Tibbs' office. This is Basin Avenue. Okay, remember in the paper this week, they talked about all of those steps right there on one side of that building being repainted as the new rainbow stairs? That is not a stairway, that is City Street, it's Basin Avenue. It has 5 addresses in that building. 5 addresses. So would you like to be a postman in Eureka? But anyway, all of this is Main Street down here, here's Spring Street, and then Center Street goes up the way. That's the Perry House, and there's the Balm of Life. The Balm of Life was the motto of J.S. Tibbs. J.S. Tibbs, he was quite a corker. He wasn't very tall, but he had the longest beard in the entire United States. It went clear to the floor. Now, I always wonder, what in the hell do you do that during dinner? Everybody said he'd stuff it in his shirt. But he would do funny things with it, and I cannot find that picture. But if you see a jeweler, there's a jeweler there, there's a big general store over here, and of course, when all of this was redone, Basin Avenue was gone, all of this was all built up. The elevator only lasted less than a year because everybody wanted to use Basin Park for the city to meet, all the people in town to go there. It's, at that time, just like it is today, that was the main part of town. That's where everybody went. So they didn't want that cuckoo elevator in there. Okay, next slide. Okay, now this was before they built it all up, and you can see the difference in everything. You can see still the boardwalks, and there's the original, the Perry House and the original Flatiron building. And see how wide that street is? It's no longer that wide. They kept changing the streets. How many people know that the streets in Eureka Springs for Main Street and Spring Street were raised? Okay, everybody that's gone to Mud Street Restaurant probably saw the plaque on the wall. They were raised anywhere, are you ready? 6 to 18 feet. So what they did is they would build, once this was all built up, they would build walls that came up this way on to make the new streets. So where you see the curbs now, that's where the walls came up. And then if you've got a horse collar, a buggy, a pot-bellied stove that you don't want anymore, come and dump it in the street. We're gonna fill it up with rock and dirt, and we're gonna put gravel on top of it and have new streets. Now all the first floors of all those buildings are now the basement. So all the buildings on Spring Street and most of them on Main Street, the second floor became the first floor, and they had to remodel all the fronts of the building. All this architecture, all of this engineering, all of this amazing workmanship, and it just kept having to keep up with the needs of the people in town. Next slide. This is a bridge that went from Mountain over to Rice Street, which is the original name of Spring Street, and that's the Spring Street boarding house over there. This is 100 feet long, and it's all made out of red cedar. And these are businesses built on that bridge. There were 3 on one side. They would sell photographs and postcards and candy and concessions. And then they built 3 more. Ooh, somebody tuned in. And then on the other side, they built 3 more, and one of them was a barbershop. So you could just do anything on that bridge, and I think you had to get down to the springs by going down these stairs and walk along there to get to the spring. All the springs except Grotto was the only one that was, Grotto and Harding were the ones on Spring Street. Sweet Spring was actually underneath, and then they found years and years later that there was another way they could get to it and open it up so it was on Spring Street. Okay, and this is the view from, literally, this is the view from Spring Street over to Mountain. But see how deep that is? That's the entire ravine, and it's all red cedar. Can you imagine how many people it took? And they didn't screw it together, they nailed it together.
This is eastern red cedar from here?
Yes.
Okay, not western cedar.
No, it's all from here. It's an amazing engineering feat, and that was there for years.
What happened to it?
It, once it probably started to poop out, literally, so they tore it all down like they did everything else. And here's another photograph, and this is Rice Street or Spring Street, and see, they don't want you to walk down here, but see how deep it is?
To work about.
And there's some of the concession stand, the postcard place, etc. And that was 100 feet long. And it was a big promenade. When you promenaded in town, that's where you went to walk. Okay, anybody know where that is? Remember where Walker Brothers store is?
No.
Now it's a parking lot. There's over 400 people on that deck. Wow. It's all made out of red cedar. They had political meetings, town meetings, church potlucks, whatever they did, that's where they met. This is Main Street and that's First Street. Those 2 houses I think are still there. But there's a speaker up there and there's all these people congregated and it's all made out of red cedar. Can you imagine the engineering that went into that?
What's the billboard?
Oh, the billboard, it says "Read the Truth," and I think it's Camel cigarettes. This was had to be in the early teens because of her hairdo and her clothes. It was before the 20s. It was probably the late teens. Anyway, go on. And this is Spring Street. After the fire in 1888, on November 23rd, 1888, there was nothing left. And after, yes, do you have a question?
Yeah, after you finish.
Okay, and what the city did is they made a new ordinance. They had to keep up. They had to change everything constantly. They made a new ordinance that any new buildings in Eureka Springs had to be made out of brick, even though the Flatiron building had burned twice, or stone. And that's what Spring Street looked
So the
like.
crescent is up there.
And the crescent's still there. That was 1886, and this is 1888. But there's just nothing left.
Where did all the stone come from?
The stone, oh, now there's. Well, when the Eureka Springs Improvement Company was formed, Mr. Rosewater, he was the one that built the library. He also owned the Stone Quarry. Scandal alert. That's where it all came from. It's all up there at Holiday Island. It all came from there.
That picture brings forth an interesting question. When we stated earlier, all that logging, I was always told one of the history was they cut the trees and sold them down the river. How to get them?
Originally, they did. They would ship them down the river to New Orleans. But once all these people were here, they didn't need to ship them anymore. They just chopped them down, cut them up.
And build houses.
And that's why it's called Plainer Hill, where the new Osage Creek motel is up there, hotel. That was where the Plainer, and that was where the Granger Kelly lumberyard was. And of course, Mr. Kelly lived right across the street in front of the, now, where the Queen Anne is. That's Mr. Kelly's house. Mr. Granger lived in that beautiful greenhouse up on Spring Street that's across from the All Seasons Inn. And he was the secretary, and then Mr. Granger was they were both, they were co-owners. But everything had to be rebuilt, but that's what happened to all the lumber. They just cut it down and used it locally. Yes, sir.
So, when did the train start running?
The train started running in 1883. It was one of the most expensive rail lines ever put in. It was $25,000 for every mile. And it came clear from Seligman. It was horrifically expensive. One of the most interesting things is Clayton Powell. Everybody says, oh, he was so wonderful. No, he was really a good businessman. And there was a big, huge, gigantic, rather stone wall that was literally part of a mountain. And he built the train over the Kings River, coming up to that literally gigantic mountain part. And he wanted to blast that mountain open. And the guy who owned that land said, no. Oh, well, we'll fix you. So he took an engine and drove it to the base of that little old mountain. And he ran it 24/7 and completely made the traffic, that toot of that engine go 24/7 until the guy buckled and sold him the land. And it became what was known as the Narrows. So everybody would go out there and climb up on it when the train came through and get their picture. Next slide. Now, where's that? I'm sorry?
Across from the post office?
Yes. That's what it looked like when I came here.
Attorney's office.
It's now the attorney's office. It was originally a grocery store right next to Elmwood. Elmwood was the only building in the fire of 1888 that survived. That was the only one that survived that fire. And it was a Conoco station way back when. Ooh, huckleberry jelly. That was the big thing about town. Huckleberry pie and huckleberry jelly.
That's the last slide.
That's the last one. So Eureka Springs has always been known for regeneration, rejuvenation, keeping up with the times, literally reformulating, redesigning, keeping up with all the needs of the town. It still is. Now, I don't know if you know it, but the roundabout that we're going to get, it's going to take 2 years to put that in. At 23 and 62. So that stoplight that's right there now, that's driving all of us crazy, there'll probably be another one over there. But what they have to do is they have to fill in that ravine some to get that roundabout in there. It's not going to be an easy project. And it's again, all of this regeneration, rejuvenation, reformulating, redesigning, architecturally, engineering, so that it will keep up with the time. But I told one of the guys when I went to that meeting about the roundabout, I said, what are you going to put in the middle of it, that big circle? He said, oh, we're not going to put anything in it. I said, well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to come into town because we live south on 23. And when all the motorcycles come into town, it is not just a line of motorcycles. It's a line of 200 motorcycles. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to wait. I'm going to drive right over that circle, right into the traffic. And I probably will not be the only one. And they had these eyes that just kept getting bigger. You really will do that? I said, yeah, we'll do that. Put big old rocks in the middle of it.
Chris, what year is that picture?
Oh, this is probably, with what they're wearing, I'd say this is the 50s.
Yeah, see the truck.
Yeah, see the truck.
So that little house that's behind the church, that's still there. And the front of the house is, this side of the house is on Owen.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of the house, they're not attached anymore, but the other side of the house is on Mountain, but the address is 8.5 Owen. But it's on Mountain, which is one of those crazy address things.
Oh, and then also there's 3 addresses to the Baptist church,
Oh, yeah.
because it's on 3 streets.
So it's right there by Mountain Street,
Yeah.
just before White Street,
Yeah.
okay.
But anyway, as I said, Eureka Springs has always been a place of regenesis, always. So everything out here at Rockspire just follows in that vein of resurgence. And it's doing a great job. Thank you. That's it. Thank you very much.
All right.